Children abandoned their wheelchair-bound mother in the landfill for considering her useless. But she had a plan. Mrs. Margaret Williams Thompson watched silently as her 3 children argued in the black car parked in front of the house gate. It was Sunday morning, and they had that look she knew well, the same one that appeared when they talked about bills to pay or when they thought she wasn't hearing their whispered conversations in corners. That's when Richard, the oldest, got out of the car and approached the wheelchair where she had been for 2 months, since the stroke that completely changed her life. "Mother, we need to talk," he said, avoiding looking directly into her eyes. "About what, son?" asked Margaret calmly, but inside she already knew that moment would come sooner or later. "You know the situation is difficult. The treatment, the medicines, the physical therapist, all that costs a lot of money we don't have." Patricia, the middle daughter, approached too, with tears in her eyes that seemed rehearsed. "Mother, we found a very good place for you to stay. There you'll have everything you need, nurses, doctors." "A nursing home, is that it?" Margaret asked directly. "It's not exactly a nursing home, Mother," lied Edward, the youngest, joining his siblings. "It's a very good rest home, but before that we need to sort some things out." Margaret's heart raced, but she kept her serene expression. During the last 2 months she had overheard conversations around the house that they thought she couldn't hear because of the medications. She knew exactly what was coming. "What kind of things?" she insisted. "Well, we thought it would be better for you to take a ride today while we organize your belongings," said Richard, already pushing the wheelchair toward the car. "Where are we going?" "Just a ride, Mother." "To get some air," replied Patricia, opening the car's rear door. Margaret allowed them to put her in the back seat, but all her senses were alert. She had known her children since they were born and knew when they were lying. The nervousness in the air was almost palpable. During the journey, she watched carefully where they were going. They left the city centre toward the outskirts, passing through streets she didn't know. The silence in the car was broken only by the sound of the engine and occasional superficial comments about the weather or passing cars. "Where exactly are we going?" she asked again when she noticed they were moving further and further away from the urban area. "We already told you, Mother. Just a ride," said Edward, but his voice trembled slightly. That's when she smelled it, a sweet, rotten odor that grew stronger as they approached their destination. Her stomach tightened when she recognized that characteristic smell, the city landfill. The car stopped in a cleared area next to huge piles of garbage. Trucks came and went, dumping more debris while some scavengers rummaged through the piles looking for something useful. "Why are we stopping here?" asked Margaret, feeling her pulse quicken. Her 3 children exchanged glances through the rearview mirror before Richard got out of the car and opened the rear door. "Mother, we need you to understand this isn't easy for us either," he said, taking the wheelchair out of the trunk. "What are you doing?" she asked, but deep down she already knew the answer. "You've become too heavy a burden for our family," said Patricia, her voice shaky but determined. "We can't take care of you anymore." "And the expenses are draining our money," Edward completed. They transferred her to the wheelchair and pushed her to an area between the garbage bags, far enough from the road that she wouldn't be easily seen by passers-by. "You can't do this to me," said Margaret, but her voice didn't show the despair they expected to hear. "Someone will find you here and take you to a suitable place," Richard lied. "It's better this way." "For all of us," Patricia added. They quickly returned to the car, avoiding looking back. The engine started, and within seconds they disappeared around the curve of the road, leaving only a cloud of dust behind. Margaret sat in silence for a few minutes, watching the scavengers in the distance who didn't seem to have noticed her presence. The midday sun was beginning to heat up, and she knew she needed to act soon. She reached her hand to the back of the wheelchair, where there was a small opening she had made in the upholstery herself a few weeks earlier. From inside it, she pulled out a thick envelope carefully protected by plastic. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Inside the envelope were documents her children never imagined existed. Deeds to properties, bank statements from accounts she had kept secret for decades, and most importantly, a will completely different from the one they knew. Margaret smiled for the first time in months. She had planned that moment a long time ago, Not exactly in that way, but she knew the day would come when her children would show who they really were. During the last few weeks, she had pretended to be more mentally debilitated than she really was, allowing them to speak freely about their plans in her presence. The conversations she overheard in corners of the house revealed much more than they imagined. Richard was spending her money on online bets, Patricia used her credit card to buy expensive clothes, and Edward was selling household items to support a drinking addiction he tried to hide from the family. One of the scavengers, a man of about 60 with simple but clean clothes, approached slowly upon noticing her presence. "Are you all right, ma'am?" he asked with some suspicion. "Yes, I am. In fact, I was waiting for someone like you," Margaret replied, surprising him. "What do you mean? Would you accept earning $500 to help me with a very simple task?" The man stopped walking and looked at her more carefully. "What kind of task?" "I want you to take me to the nearest public phone. I need to make some urgent calls." Margaret opened the purse on her lap and took out the money, showing she meant business. "Are you sure you're all right? How did you get here?" "It's a long story, Mr. Anthony. Anthony Carter." "Mr. Anthony, my children brought me here because they think I'm a useless burden to them. What they don't know is that I've been expecting this for a long time." Anthony looked around, checking if anyone was watching, and then turned his attention back to her. "Did you plan this?" "Not exactly in this way, but I knew the day would come, and when it did, I would be prepared." She briefly told him about the documents hidden in the chair and the discoveries she had made about her children's behavior. "Do you want to get revenge on them?" "It's not revenge, Mr. Anthony. It's justice. They made a decision about my life without consulting me. Now I'm going to make some decisions about their lives." Anthony agreed to help her, intrigued by the determination of this woman who seemed to have lost everything but maintained an impressive calm. They headed to the public phone near the main entrance of the city landfill, where she made the first call. "Dr. Michael, it's Margaret Thompson. I need you to execute exactly what we discussed last month. Yes, the time has come. You can start today." The second call was to a bank. "I'd like to immediately block all transactions on the accounts where my children are listed as attorneys. Yes, all 3 accounts. The security code is 4478. Anthony listened to the calls with growing admiration for that woman's organization. How you really had everything prepared. "Mr. Anthony, when a person reaches 72 years old, you learn you can't rely solely on others' kindness. You need to have a plan B. And now I need a place to stay for a few days while things get sorted out. Do you know any simple but clean boarding houses around here?" Anthony thought for a moment. "Yes, I do. Mrs. Mary has a small but very tidy boarding house. She's good people." "Perfect. And Mr. Anthony, if you help me over the next few days, I can pay you very well for it. It's not charity, it's a job." "What kind of job?" "I want you to be my witness. I need someone trustworthy to confirm how I arrived here today." They headed to Mrs. Mary's boarding house, a 50-year-old woman who received Margaret with some initial suspicion, but completely changed her attitude when she paid a week in advance in cash. "You can have the ground floor room. It's easier because of the wheelchair," offered Mary. "Thank you very much. And would you accept Mr. Anthony staying in another room? He's helping me with some important matters." Mary agreed, happy with the unexpected clientele. That first night at the boarding house, Margaret called her lawyer again. "Dr. Michael, I want to sue my 3 children for abandonment and misappropriation. I have all the necessary evidence." "Margaret, are you sure about this? Once we file this lawsuit, there's no turning back." "Doctor, they left me at a city landfill as if I were an old sack of trash. I believe that makes it quite clear what they think of me. I'll file the papers tomorrow morning. And what about the assets?" "Execute everything as we planned. They're in for a surprise." Meanwhile, the 3 children were celebrating at an expensive restaurant downtown. "Finally free from that responsibility," said Richard, toasting with imported wine. "Now we can sell our house and split the money," added Patricia. "And we won't have to put up with those moans and complaints anymore," Edward finished. They didn't know that at that very moment, their comfortable life was coming to an end. The next morning, The lawyer Dr. Michael Sanders visited the house where the three lived to deliver the first legal documents. Richard answered the door still in his pajamas, hungover from the previous night. "Are you Richard Williams Thompson?" "Yes, that's me. Who wants to know?" "I'm your mother's lawyer, Margaret Williams Thompson. I have some documents to deliver to you." Richard's blood ran cold. How did the lawyer know where to find him? And most importantly, how had his mother gotten a lawyer? "Is my mother well?" "Your mother is very well, thank you for asking, despite the circumstances in which she was left yesterday." Richard felt his legs weaken. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I'm talking about the abandonment you and your siblings committed yesterday morning at the city landfill. I have here the papers for a lawsuit for abandonment of a dependent and misappropriation." Richard called his siblings, who came running down the stairs upon hearing the conversation. "How did she get out of there?" asked Patricia without thinking. "Ah, so you admit you knew exactly where you left your mother," said the lawyer, noting the statement. "No, I didn't say that," Patricia tried to correct herself. "I recorded everything in the presence of 2 witnesses, informed Dr. Michael, showing a small recorder. "As of today, all bank accounts where you have power of attorney are blocked. This house, which belongs to your mother, will be sealed for evidence preservation, and you have 48 hours to hire lawyers to defend yourselves in court." The 3 were in total shock. "That's impossible," shouted Edward. "Our mother can barely think straight after her stroke." "Interesting that you mention that, since the medical reports she provided show her mental capacity is perfect. You're the ones who spread that false information to justify your actions." "What medical reports?" asked Richard. "Your mother underwent a full battery of private neurological tests last month. All at her own expense, of course, since she discovered you were diverting her treatment money." The lawyer handed over the documents and left, leaving the 3 in complete shock. "How did she find out about the money?" whispered Patricia. "And how did she have money to pay for a lawyer and tests?" asked Edward. "Guys, we need to find her and resolve this situation," said Richard, trying to take control. They spent the rest of the day trying to locate Margaret. They visited hospitals, health clinics, and even called the city hall asking about elderly care facilities. Nothing. No Margaret Williams Thompson had been admitted to any public institution in the last 2 days. "It's like she's disappeared," said Edward nervously. "People don't just disappear, Edward. She has to be somewhere," replied Patricia. "What worries me is how she knew we were going to do that. It's almost like she was expecting it." Richard was right to be worried. Margaret wasn't just expecting it. She had prepared every detail of her response. During the second night at the boarding house, she received a visit from a woman who would be crucial for the next steps of her plan. "Mrs. Margaret, I'm Carol Anderson, the caregiver you hired over the phone." Carol was a 45-year-old woman, a retired nurse who provided private care for the elderly. Margaret had contacted her through a medical referral a few weeks earlier. "Carol, I'm so glad you came. I really need your help. You told me over the phone that your family situation had changed, but I didn't quite understand what happened." Margaret told Carol the whole story, who was horrified by the account. "They really did that to you?" "They did. But Carol, I have a proposal to make. Besides taking care of me, I want you to help me rebuild my life independently. I can pay very well for this." "How so?" "I want to rent a simple but tidy little house where I can live with dignity. I want to hire your services permanently, and I want you to help me handle all the legal details of this separation from my family." Carol was intrigued by Margaret's determination. "Do you have the means for this?" "Carol, my children believe I only have my pension and some saved change. What they don't know is that I worked for 30 years as an executive secretary for a large company, made investments for decades, and inherited some properties from distant relatives." "How many properties?" "Besides the house where they live, which is mine, I have 3 more houses in different neighborhoods of the city, all rented out, generating monthly income they never knew existed." Carol almost fell off her chair. "You own 4 properties, and I have bank investments that have been yielding for 20 years. Carol, I'm not a poor, dependent little old lady like they think. I was discreetly covering half the expenses of that house." But why did you never tell them this? Because I wanted to see who they really were. I wanted to know if they loved me for who I am or just for what I could give them. Carol began to understand the scope of Margaret's plan. And now you know. Now I know. They see me as a useless burden. Very well. I will give them exactly what they want, my complete absence from their lives. The next morning, Carol helped Margaret find a perfect house to rent. It was a small single-story house in a quiet neighborhood, with an access ramp and all the necessary adaptations for wheelchair users. "Is the rent amount acceptable for you?" asked the owner. "It's perfect. I will pay 6 months in advance." The man was surprised by the proposal but immediately accepted. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. While Margaret was settling into her new home, her children were facing the first major financial crisis of their lives. The freezing of the bank accounts revealed the extent of their dependence on their mother's money. Richard discovered that his salary alone didn't even cover half of the expenses he was used to having. Patricia realized that a large part of her wardrobe had been purchased with her mother's credit card. Edward saw his gambling and drinking debts all appear at once, without having his mother's money to secretly pay them off. "We need to find her and apologize," said Richard on the 3rd day after the abandonment. "It's no use just apologizing, Richard. The lawyer said she wants to sue us." "This could turn into a criminal case," replied Patricia. "And if she really has all those properties the lawyer mentioned?" asked Edward. "What properties? Our mother only has her retirement," said Richard. "Really? Because the lawyer said something about asset freezing and property preservation." They decided to go to the city's property registry office to investigate. What they discovered left them in a state of shock. Margaret Williams Thompson was, in fact, the owner of 4 urban properties, all registered exclusively in her name. Besides the house where they lived, she owned a house in the city centre, another in a middle-class neighborhood, and a third in an area that was rapidly appreciating. "How did she never tell us about this?" asked Patricia, incredulous. "And where did the money come from to buy all this?" added Edward. Richard was mentally calculating the approximate value of the assets and arrived at a figure that frightened him. "Guys, our mother must have over $500,000 in real estate assets, plus the retirement, plus the investments the lawyer mentioned," completed Edward. "And we treated her as if she were a poor burden who only caused expenses," whispered Patricia, beginning to understand the magnitude of the mistake they had made. That same day, Margaret was in her new home organizing the next steps of her plan with Carol and Dr. Michael. "Doctor, have your children already discovered about the properties?" asked the lawyer. "Probably yes. Richard has always been sharp with financial matters. They must have gone to the registry office today or yesterday." "And how do you feel about that?" Margaret thought for a moment before answering. "I feel a deep sadness, Dr. Michael. Not for the loss of the money or the properties, but for discovering who my children really are. For 72 years, I believed I had raised people of character." Carol approached and held her hand. "Mrs. Margaret, do you think there's no possibility of reconciliation?" "Carol, they left me at a city landfill, literally among garbage bags as if I were a disposable object. That's not something you do out of desperation or lack of alternatives. That's something you do when you've completely lost respect and love for the person. But what if they were desperate? And what if they really didn't have money to take care of you?" insisted Carol. "Carol, my dear, I was secretly paying over 60% of that household's expenses. The electricity bill, the monthly groceries, the medicines they took, the car fuel. They had money because I gave them money. Their financial desperation was an excuse, not a reality." Dr. Michael showed some documents he had prepared. "Margaret, here are the statements proving all the transfers you made to your children over the last 2 years. The total amount exceeds $50,000. $50,000 that I gave them thinking I was helping a united family. $50,000 that they spent knowing it came from the mother they considered a useless burden." Carol began to understand why Margaret was being so firm in her decisions. That afternoon, they received an unexpected visit. Anthony, the waste picker who had helped Margaret on the first day, appeared at the door with a worried expression. "Mrs. Margaret, sorry to bother you. But there are some men asking about you at the city landfill. What kind of men? 3 well-dressed people with a black car. They're offering money to anyone who knows something about you. Margaret smiled. They're my children. They finally decided to look for me. Do you want me to tell them where you are? No, Mr. Anthony, it's not time yet, but I thank you very much for coming to let me know. Carol was intrigued by the decision. Mrs. Margaret, why don't you want them to know where you are? Because, my dear, they need to understand the consequences of the choices they made. I need them to feel what it means to lose someone they love. But are you sure they love you? I'm not sure of anything about my children anymore, Carol. That's why I need to see what they'll do now. If they're looking for me out of genuine love and remorse, or just because they found out I have money. Dr. Michael agreed with the strategy. It's an interesting psychological approach, Margaret. Let's see how they react when they realize they've lost not only their mother, but also their source of financial security. Over the next few days, Margaret's children intensified their search. They visited all hospitals within a 50-kilometer radius, called nursing homes, shelters, and even the civil defense. Richard was growing increasingly desperate. Guys, it's been a week since she disappeared. What if something happened to her? Richard, stop talking nonsense. She's somewhere, probably planning how to screw us over, replied Edward. Edward is right, this whole thing was planned. Mom knew we were going to do that and was prepared, said Patricia. But how could she know? We never talked about it in front of her, insisted Richard. Richard, we used to talk in her room thinking she was asleep or under the effect of medication. It's possible she heard everything. So she pretended to be more debilitated than she really was to find out our plans. That's exactly what happened, confirmed Patricia. The reality was starting to become clear to them. Margaret wasn't the helpless victim they imagined. She was a lucid, organized, and strategic woman who had discovered their true intentions and prepared a fitting response. Meanwhile, Margaret was adapting to her new life with Carol's help. For the first time in months, she felt respected and valued. Carol, do you know what hurts me the most in all this situation? She asked one afternoon while having coffee. What, Mrs. Margaret? It's that I spent 72 years of my life prioritizing my children's well-being above my own. I worked 16 hours a day when they were little to make sure they had everything they needed. I gave up on marrying again after their father left to dedicate myself entirely to raising them. Carol listened in silence, sensing that Margaret needed to vent. I sold jewelry my mother had left me to pay for Richard's college. I worked 2 jobs for years to fund Patricia's interior design course. I took out a bank loan to help Edward open his first store. And do they know about all these sacrifices? Yes, Carol. They've always known. But in their minds, it was my obligation as a mother. It was never seen as a sacrifice or a demonstration of love. Is that why you're being so firm now? It's because I discovered that raising children with so much love and dedication doesn't guarantee they'll become people of character. They grew accustomed to receiving without giving anything in return, and when I reached the stage of life where I would need care from them, they saw me as a burden. Carol understood Margaret's decision more and more. Mrs. Margaret, may I ask a personal question? Of course, dear. Do you miss them? Margaret paused to think before answering. I miss the boys they were, the 10-year-old Richard who hugged me when I came home tired from work, the 15-year-old Patricia who made me little cards on Mother's Day, the 8-year-old Edward who said that when he grew up, he would take care of me forever. But you don't miss who they became? No, Carol. The adults they became are people I don't recognize as my children. At that moment, the phone rang. It was Dr. Michael with important news. Margaret, I just got a call from the lawyer your children hired. They want to schedule a meeting to try for an out-of-court settlement. What kind of settlement? They didn't give details, but they said they recognize the mistake they made and want to make amends. Interesting. How long after finding out that I have assets do they show up talking about making amends? Exactly 3 days, Margaret. As I thought. Dr. Michael, tell them I accept a meeting, but it will be here at my house, in my presence, with you and Carol as witnesses. And the conditions? No preconditions. I want to hear what they have to say before making any decision. I'll schedule it for this week. When Margaret hung up the phone, Carol noticed a change in her expression. Are you nervous? I'm anxious, Carol. anxious to find out if my children came here because they miss the mother they lost or because they want back the source of money they lost. And if it's for money, then I'll know I made the right decision, and I'll move on with my life knowing that I did everything I could for them as a mother, but that I can't change who they chose to be as people. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday afternoon. Margaret spent the previous days emotionally preparing for that encounter. Carol noticed she was quieter and more thoughtful than usual. "Mrs. Margaret, are you okay?" "I'm afraid, Carol." "Afraid of what?" "Afraid of finding out there's nothing more to be done for my children. Afraid of having to finally accept that I lost them not by accident or illness, but by their choice." "And if they're genuinely sorry?" "Then I'll have to decide if I'm capable of forgiving something as serious as what they did to me." On Thursday, at 2 in the afternoon, Richard, Patricia, and Edward arrived at Margaret's house accompanied by their lawyer, Dr. Frank Coleman. Margaret received them in the living room, seated in her wheelchair, with Carol by her side, and Dr. Michael organizing documents on a side table. The initial silence was broken by Richard. "Mom, we wanted to start by apologizing for what we did." "Apologies for what, exactly?" asked Margaret, keeping her tone of voice neutral. "Because of what happened last Sunday," replied Patricia, avoiding details. "Patricia, if you came here to talk to me, you need to be honest and say exactly what you did." "I don't accept euphemisms." The three exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable. "Mum, we took you to a place that wasn't suitable and left you there alone," said Edward. "Edward, you abandoned me at a landfill. Call things by their name." Richard took a deep breath before continuing. "All right, Mum. We abandoned you at the city landfill. It was wrong, it was cruel, and we deeply regret it." "Why did you do it?" "Because we thought we couldn't take care of you anymore," replied Patricia. "For financial reasons?" "Mostly, yes," admitted Richard. Margaret looked at Dr. Michael, who opened a folder and took out some documents. "Dr. Michael, please show them the bank statements from the last 2 years." The lawyer spread the papers on the table. "These are the receipts for all the transfers your mother made to you over the past 24 months. Richard, your mother transferred $18,000 to your account. Patricia, $17,000 to you. Edward, $15,000. Not to mention," continued Dr. Michael, "the bills she paid directly from her account: electricity, phone, internet, groceries, pharmacy, and fuel. Adding it all up, your mother spent over $80,000 supporting you in the last 2 years. The silence in the room was deafening. "So when you abandoned me for financial difficulties, you were actually abandoning the person who was financially supporting you," said Margaret. Richard tried to defend himself. "Mom, we didn't know you were paying all that." "Richard, all these transfers were made from my account to yours. How could you not know? We thought it was money left over from your retirement." "Oh, you thought my $1,200 retirement left enough money to give $2,000 a month to each of you?" Patricia began to cry. "Mom, we made a big mistake." "We recognize that." "Do you recognize it because you found out I have money, or because you truly understood the seriousness of what you did?" "For both reasons, Mom," admitted Edward. "Edward, at least you were honest." "Dr. Frank," she addressed her children's lawyer, "what proposal have your clients brought?" Dr. Frank consulted his notes. "Mrs. Margaret, my clients would like to propose that you return to live with them, that they commit to taking proper care of you, and in return you drop the criminal charges." Margaret smiled for the first time since the meeting began. "That's an interesting proposal, but I have a few questions. Richard, have you stopped online gambling?" Richard turned red. "How do you know about that?" "Answer the question." "No, Mom, I haven't stopped." "Patricia, do you intend to return the clothes you bought with my credit card without my authorization?" "I didn't know you didn't want—" "Do you or don't you?" "Some I've already worn, Mom. I can't return them." "Edward, are you getting treatment for your alcoholism?" Edward lowered his head. "No, Mom." "So you want me to go back to a house where I'll be funding Richard's gambling addiction, Patricia's shopping addiction, and Edward's drinking addiction?" "It's not exactly like that, Mom," Richard tried to argue. "It's exactly like that, Richard. You want back the source of money you lost, not the mother you abandoned." Carol, who had remained silent until then, asked to speak. "Excuse me, may I give my opinion?" Of course, Carol, said Margaret. I've been taking care of Mrs. Margaret for 2 weeks, and I can say she's happier and more at peace now than she probably has been in years. You only saw her physical limitations after the stroke, but you didn't realize that emotionally she was being destroyed by the lack of respect and affection. You don't know us well enough to speak about our family, replied Patricia, irritated. Patricia, I took care of my own mother until she passed away, and I can recognize an elderly person who is being emotionally mistreated. Your mother wasn't just physically sick, she was sick with sadness. Carol's comment hit Richard right in the heart. Mom, can we have a chance to show that we've changed? Richard, you've had 72 years of my life to show who you are. The chance you want now is to show that you can pretend to be different people because you discovered I have money. Dr. Michael intervened. Margaret, your children would like to know what your conditions are for a possible reconciliation. Margaret looked at each of her children before answering. My conditions are as follows. First, you must return every penny you took from my account over the last 2 years with monetary correction. Second, each of you must undergo psychological counseling for at least 1 year. Third, you must accept that I will live independently in my own home with my caregiver, and you will only be able to visit me when I authorize it. And the fourth condition? Asked Edward. The fourth condition is that you will never again have access to my bank accounts or power of attorney over my assets. All my financial resources will be managed exclusively by me and Dr. Michael. The silence that followed was heavy and awkward. Dr. Frank consulted with his clients in whispers before responding. Mrs. Margaret, these conditions are very strict. My clients would like to propose some modifications. What modifications? Regarding the return of the money, they would like to pay in 48 installments. Regarding the psychological counseling, they would like to reduce it to 6 months. And regarding the visits, they would like to have guaranteed weekly visits. Margaret looked at Dr. Michael and then at Carol before answering. Dr. Frank, your clients can take as much time as they want to decide whether to accept my conditions, but the conditions are non-negotiable. They have 72 hours to give me a definitive answer. And if they don't accept, asked Dr. Frank, then I will move on with my life and with the criminal proceedings. Simple as that. Richard stood up from his chair. Mom, you're being very hard on us. Richard, you threw me away like trash and now you think I'm being hard, replied Margaret, keeping her calm. But we regret it, Mom, insisted Patricia. Patricia, you regret it because you discovered you made a miscalculation. You thought I was poor and dependent, but you discovered I was rich and independent. Your regret isn't moral, it's financial. Margaret was right. During the next 3 days, the children debated intensely among themselves about the conditions presented. Guys, $80,000 to return is a lot of money, complained Edward. But if we don't accept, she'll sue us, and we could lose much more, argued Richard. And this psychologist thing, I don't have any problems that need a psychologist, said Patricia. Patricia, after what we did, I think any psychologist would say we do have problems, replied Richard. At the end of the 3rd day, they returned to Margaret's house with the answer. Mom, we accept your conditions, said Richard. All of them? All of them. Are you sure? Because there will be no more negotiations after this. We are sure, Mom. Margaret looked at each of them for a long time. Very well. Dr. Michael will prepare a contract with all the terms. You have 1 week to sign. And after that, Mother? Asked Edward. After that, we'll see if you can keep your promises. And during this process, I'll find out if there's still hope for our family, or if it's better for everyone to go their separate ways for good. The contract was signed the following week. Richard, Patricia, and Edward formally committed to repaying the money, attending therapy, and respecting their mother's independence. But Margaret knew things wouldn't be as simple as they seemed on paper. 2 weeks after the agreement, Carol noticed that Margaret was quieter than usual. Mrs. Margaret, are you worried about something? Carol, I'm wondering if I did the right thing by giving them this chance. Why? Because I know my children. They'll follow the agreement just enough to avoid legal trouble, but I don't believe they've genuinely changed. Do you think they'll break the agreement? I think they'll try to find ways around the rules without technically breaking them. Margaret was right. In less than a month, problems started to surface. Richard was going to therapy sessions but kept gambling online. He had simply switched to different sites and created accounts under friends' names. Patricia attended her psychology sessions but didn't take them seriously. She told the therapist only edited versions of events and refused to acknowledge the seriousness of her actions. Edward stopped drinking for 2 weeks, but then started again, justifying that a little beer now and then doesn't hurt. As for the money, they began paying the first installments, but soon emergencies came up that made regular payments impossible. "Mother, there's a problem with my car and I won't be able to pay this month's installment," said Richard during one of the controlled visits. "Richard, did you gamble away the installment money?" "No, Mother, how can you say that?" "Because I've had a private detective investigating you since you signed the contract." Richard's blood ran cold. "You're spying on us?" "I'm checking if you're keeping the agreement, and I found out you're not." Dr. Michael had advised Margaret to hire a private investigator to monitor her children's behavior during the trial period. "Carol, call Dr. Michael. It's time to show them the report." When Dr. Michael arrived with the detective's report, the truth came out. "Richard, you gambled away $2,000 just last week. Patricia, you bought $1,500 worth of clothes using a credit card you hid from therapy. Edward, you've been frequenting 3 different bars to hide from us that you've started drinking again." The 3 were shocked by the level of detail in the information. "Mother, this is an invasion of privacy," protested Patricia. "Patricia, you signed a legal contract. I have the right to verify if you're complying with the terms. But hiring a detective is too much," insisted Edward. "You know what's too much, Edward. Abandoning your own mother at a city landfill and then pretending to be sorry to try and get access to her money again." Richard tried one last strategy. "Mother, we can try again. This time will be different." "Richard, you've already had your chance, and you've shown that you're exactly who I thought you were." Margaret picked up the contract papers and tore them up in front of them. "The agreement is cancelled. You have 15 days to move out of my house and find somewhere to live. After that, I'll rent the property to a family that knows how to appreciate what they have." "Mother, you can't do this to us," shouted Patricia. "I can and I am. The house is mine. You broke the agreement, and our family relationship is over for good." "And what about the money we've already paid back?" asked Edward. "It will be used to cover the emotional damage you've caused me over the last few years." "Doctor, Michael confirmed the legality of all of Margaret's actions. Your children have no legal rights over the property and broke a formal contract. Mrs. Margaret Williams Thompson is within her rights." Margaret looked at each of her children for the last time. "I dedicated 72 years of my life trying to be a good mother to you. I worked tirelessly to give you everything you needed. I gave up my own dreams to fulfill yours, and I supported you financially, even when you were independent adults. In return, you discarded me like trash when you thought I had become inconvenient." "Mom—" Richard tried to interrupt her. "Richard, let me finish. You had an opportunity to show that you were capable of genuine change, and you wasted that chance. Now you'll have to learn to live with the consequences of the choices you made. Will you never want to see us again?" asked Patricia, with tears in her eyes. "Patricia, you are free to try to rebuild your lives and become better people. If one day you manage to do that genuinely, perhaps we can talk again. But as long as you remain who you are today, our relationship is impossible." They left the house in silence, knowing they had definitively lost not only a mother, but also their source of financial and emotional security. In the following weeks, Margaret dedicated herself to completely reorganizing her life. With the help of Carol and Dr. Michael, she created a project that would give new meaning to her final years. "Carol, I want to create a support center for the elderly who have gone through situations similar to mine." "What do you mean, Mrs. Margaret?" "I want to use part of my money to rent a large house, hire specialized professionals, and offer temporary shelter and psychological support for elderly people who have been abandoned or mistreated by their families." Carol was moved by the idea. "It's a beautiful proposal, Mrs. Margaret, and I want it to be sustainable, not just charity. We will also offer legal counseling, help with financial reorganization, and support for these people to regain their autonomy and dignity. Dr. Michael found the project feasible and interesting. Margaret, this could become a model for other cities. It's a real social need. During the following months, Margaret dedicated herself intensively to the project. She rented a spacious and adapted house, hired psychologists, social workers, nurses, and lawyers specialized in elderly rights. The Center for Support and Dignity for the Elderly began operating 6 months after the definitive break with her children. Carol became the general coordinator of the center, and Margaret actively participated in all decisions and activities. "Mrs. Margaret, we have 15 people being assisted this month," reported Carol. "And how are they adapting?" "Very well, especially Mrs. Marlene, who arrived here in the same situation as you did." Mrs. Marlene was an 81-year-old lady who had been abandoned by her only daughter at a bus station after discovering she had early dementia. "How is she today?" "We discovered the dementia was a misdiagnosis. It was just severe depression caused by emotional mistreatment. With proper follow-up, she is becoming lucid and active again." Margaret smiled. "That's exactly why we created this place, Carol." 6 months after the center's inauguration, Margaret received an unexpected call. "Hello? Mom, it's Richard." Margaret remained silent for a few seconds. "Richard, how did you get my number?" "Mom, we heard about the center you created. It's on social media, in the local newspapers. You've become famous." "And what do you want?" "Mom, we wanted to talk. The situation here has become very difficult after you removed us from the house. Edward lost his job, Patricia is depressed, and I'm in debt because of gambling." "Richard, what does that have to do with me?" "Mom, we thought, couldn't you help us one more time? I promise this time will be different." Margaret looked out the window of the center, where she saw some elderly people chatting in the garden, people who had regained their dignity and joy for life after being welcomed. "Richard, you've had every chance you could have. You wasted them all. Now my energy is focused on people who truly want to rebuild their lives in a positive way." "But Mom, we're your family." "Richard, family isn't defined just by blood ties. It's defined by love, respect, care, and reciprocity. You never understood that." "So you're never going to forgive us?" Margaret thought carefully before answering. "Richard, forgiveness is something you earn through real changes, not through desperate pleas when things get tough. If you want my forgiveness, you first need to forgive yourselves and genuinely change. When that happens, if it happens, we can talk. And in the meantime, you'll learn to live without depending on me. It'll be good for you to discover who you really are when you have to rely only on your own resources." Margaret hung up the phone and turned her attention back to the center. Carol approached. "Was it them?" "Yes." "Richard." "And what did he want?" "The same as always. Money and another chance without real change." "Are you okay?" "I'm great, Carol. For the first time in years, I'm exactly where I need to be, doing exactly what should be done." That night, Margaret reflected on the last few months of her life. She had lost 3 children, but she had gained a much larger family, the elderly she cared for at the center, the professionals who worked with her, and most importantly, she had regained herself. At 72, Margaret had learned that it's never too late to start over, and that dignity isn't negotiable, not even with our own flesh and blood. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. 2 years had passed since the center was created, and Margaret was celebrating her 74th birthday surrounded by the new family she had built. Mrs. Marlene, who had fully recovered, had become her best friend and confidant. Together, they managed the center with the efficiency of a successful business. "Margaret, you saved my life," Marlene said during the small birthday party. "Actually, Marlene, you saved mine too. When I created this place, I thought I was helping other people. I didn't know I was saving myself too." Carol, who had become like a daughter to Margaret, approached with a small but lovingly decorated cake. "Mrs. Margaret, make a wish." Margaret closed her eyes and made her wish silently before blowing out the candles. "What did you wish for?" asked one of the center's residents. "I wished for health and strength to keep helping people who need to rebuild their lives." At that moment, Carol received a call on her cell phone. "Center for Support and Dignity," Carol speaking. "Hi, good afternoon. It's about that report that aired on TV yesterday about your center. I wanted to know if I could schedule a visit." "Of course. For when?" "Would today be possible? It's just that my situation is kind of urgent." "Yes, you can come. What time?" "I can be there in an hour." Carol hung up and went to Margaret. "Mrs. Margaret, there's someone wanting to visit the center today. Said it's urgent." "No problem. Tell her to come." An hour later, a woman about 40 years old arrived at the center, accompanied by a silver-haired lady. Carol greeted them at the entrance. "Are you the ones who called earlier?" "Yes, I'm Julie. This is my mother, Mrs. Irene." Carol led them to the room where Margaret was organizing some documents. "Mrs. Margaret, can you receive these visitors?" Margaret looked up and was surprised to see Mrs. Irene, who seemed nervous and embarrassed. "Of course, please sit down." Julie began to explain the situation. "Mrs. Margaret, I saw the report about the center on television yesterday and was very impressed with your story." "Thank you, and what is your situation?" "Well, it's complicated. My mother has lived with me for 5 years since my father left. At first everything was fine, but lately—" Julie stopped talking and looked at her mother. "You can speak, dear. I want her to know the truth. Lately I've been very impatient with my mother. I argue with her over small things, get irritated when she asks for help. And yesterday I said some very ugly things that made me realize I'm becoming a horrible person." Margaret noticed that Mrs. Irene had tears in her eyes. "And Mrs. Irene, how do you feel?" "I feel like a burden, Mrs. Margaret. My daughter works all day, comes home tired, and still has to take care of me. I see that she's suffering, but I don't know what to do." Margaret immediately understood the situation. "Julie, your mother is not a burden. Caring for an elderly person is challenging, especially when we don't have proper support or guidance." "But Mrs. Margaret, I said some horrible things to her yesterday. I told her she was messing up my life, that I couldn't have a personal life anymore because of her." "And how did you feel afterward?" "I cried all night. I realized I was repeating things I always criticized in other people. I don't want to be that kind of daughter, but I don't know how to handle this situation." Margaret identified with Julie's honesty. "Julie, you came here because you recognize there's a problem and want to solve it. That's already 50% of the way. Do you think there's a way?" "Of course there is. You two love each other, that's evident. What's missing is organization, support, and some strategies to make living together healthier for both of you." Margaret spent the next hour talking with Julie and Mrs. Irene, understanding the family dynamics better and offering practical suggestions. "Julie, what if your mother came to spend a few afternoons a week here at the center? She would participate in activities, make new friends, and you would have some time to take care of yourself. Would that be possible?" "Of course. We have a partial care program exactly for situations like yours." Mrs. Irene was excited about the proposal. "I would love to meet people my age and participate in activities. And Julie, how about joining our support group for family caregivers, once a week, on Wednesday evenings?" "There's a group like that?" "We created it 6 months ago. Family members who care for the elderly meet to exchange experiences and receive psychological guidance." Julie began to cry. "Mrs. Margaret, I thought I was the only person going through this." "Julie, you are not alone. And most importantly, recognizing that you need help doesn't make you a bad daughter. It makes you a smart daughter." In the following months, Margaret closely followed Julie and Mrs. Irene's progress. Mrs. Irene adapted wonderfully to the center's activities. She made strong friendships, actively participated in craft workshops, and helped in the community garden that Margaret had created. Julie, in turn, found the emotional support she so needed in the family caregivers group. She discovered that other people faced similar challenges and learned practical strategies to deal with the stress of caregiving. "Mrs. Margaret, I don't know how to thank you for what you've done for us," said Julie during one of the group sessions. "Julie, you did it for yourselves. I just offered the tools. But you showed that it was possible to have healthy, intergenerational relationships. And you showed that when there's genuine love and willingness to change, any situation can be improved. The story of Julie and Mrs. Irene spread through the community, bringing more families to the center seeking support. Margaret realized she had found her true calling, helping families build healthy relationships between generations. It was during this growth phase of the center that Margaret received a visit that would change her perspective on family again. It was a Thursday afternoon when Carol approached her with a worried expression. "Mrs. Margaret, there's a young woman at the reception who says she's your granddaughter." Margaret's heart raced. "My granddaughter? Which one?" "She said she's Edward's daughter." Margaret took a deep breath. Mary was the only granddaughter who had truly had a close relationship with her before the family problems. "Send her in, Carol." Mary entered the room, visibly nervous. She was 15 now and had grown a lot since their last meeting. "Hi, Grandma." "Hi, Mary. How did you find me?" "I saw the news report on television about the center. I recognized you right away." Mary sat in the chair across from Margaret's desk. "Mary, how are things at home?" "Grandma, that's why I came here. Things are really bad." "What do you mean?" "After you cut ties with my dad and my uncles, everything fell apart. My dad lost his job because he started drinking more. My mom is working 2 jobs to pay the rent. And I can't stand the heavy atmosphere at home anymore." Margaret felt her chest tighten. "Mary, tell me exactly what's happening." "Grandma, my dad drinks every day now. Sometimes he gets aggressive, yells at my mom, breaks things. My mom cries in secret, but I see it, and they're always speaking badly about you, as if everything happening is your fault. And you, how do you feel about all this?" "I understand why you did what you did, Grandma. I always knew my dad, my Uncle Richard, and my Aunt Patricia treated you badly. I saw it, but I was a child and didn't know what to do." Mary began to cry. "Grandma, I know you have no obligation toward me, but could I come here sometimes? Just to talk, to have a place where I feel at peace?" Margaret's heart broke. "Mary, you'll always be welcome here. You're not at all to blame for the mistakes your parents made. But what if they find out I'm coming here? Mary, you can come whenever you want, but I don't want this to cause more problems for you at home." "Grandma, can I ask a question?" "Of course, dear." "Do you miss our family, the way things were before?" Margaret thought carefully before answering. "Mary, I miss what I thought our family was. But I discovered that what I thought was love and unity was actually financial dependence and convenience." "And me? Did you miss me?" "Every day, Mary. You were the only person in the family who showed genuine affection for me." Mary stood up and hugged Margaret for the first time in nearly 3 years. "I missed you so much too, Grandma." From that day on, Mary began visiting Margaret regularly, always on Saturday mornings. She helped with the center's activities, talked with the elderly, and found in Margaret the emotional support she lacked at home. "Grandma, can I say something?" "Of course, Mary." "I think you did the right thing. My dad needs to learn to live without depending on others. Maybe then he'll stop drinking and become a better person again." "Mary, your father can always change if he really wants to. The problem is that until now he hasn't truly wanted to. Do you think our family could ever reconcile?" "Mary, reconciliation is only possible when all parties genuinely acknowledge their mistakes and are willing to make real changes. So far that hasn't happened. And if it does happen someday? If it truly happens, I'm willing to talk, but it would have to be real change, not just words or promises." During the following months, Mary became a constant presence at the center. She stood out especially in her work with the elderly, showing impressive emotional maturity for her age. "Mrs. Margaret, Mary has a special talent for dealing with elderly people," commented Carol. "It's true, she inherited some good qualities from the family. Do you think she could follow this path professionally? If that's what she wants, I'll support her completely. We need more young people interested in working with the elderly." Mary was in her last year of high school and was starting to think about the future. "Grandma, I'm thinking of majoring in psychology or social work in college." "Why?" "Because of the work here at the center. I saw how you help people rebuild their lives, and I want to be able to do the same thing. Margaret was moved by Mary's decision. Mary, if you choose this path, I'll support you completely, even financially, if necessary. Grandma, I don't want you to think I'm here for personal gain. Mary, I know exactly why you're here. It's for the same reason I am, because we found in each other the support and affection we needed. It was then that Mary told Margaret something that completely changed her perspective on the family's future. Grandma, my mother wants to talk to you. Your mother? Yes. She said she wants to apologize for how she treated you all these years. Mary, your mother never treated me badly directly. But she allowed my father to, right? She never defended you when she should have. Mary was right. Claudia, her daughter-in-law, had always been passive in conflict situations. Your mother said why she wants to talk to me now. She said that after seeing the work you're doing here at the center, she realized she misjudged you all these years. And what do you think about that, Mary? I think my mother is a good person who made wrong choices. She was always afraid of confronting my father, so she ended up agreeing with him even when she knew he was wrong. Margaret decided to give Claudia a chance. Mary, tell your mother she can come here to talk with me, but she should come alone without your father. She'll be very happy, Grandma. A week later, Claudia showed up at the center in the middle of the afternoon. Margaret received her in the same room where she had met with her children years before, but this time the atmosphere was completely different. Margaret, thank you so much for agreeing to talk with me. Claudia, sit down and tell me what you want. I wanted to apologize for all these years of passivity, for not defending you when I should have, for allowing Edward to mistreat you. Margaret observed that Claudia seemed sincere. Claudia, why did you never defend me? Because I was afraid of Edward. When he drank, he became aggressive, and whenever I tried to defend someone, he would direct his anger at me. And why are you saying this now? Because after you left our lives, Edward got much worse. And I realized you were one of the only things that kept him somewhat controlled. Claudia began to cry. Margaret, I know I have no right to ask for anything, but Mary is suffering a lot at home. Edward drinks every day, lost his job, and sometimes becomes violent. Violent how? He never hit us, but he yells, breaks things, threatens. Mary gets scared. Margaret felt genuine concern. Claudia, why don't you leave him? Because I don't have the financial means. I work 2 jobs, but I can barely pay the rent and basic bills. And Edward doesn't work. He can't hold a job for more than 2 weeks. He shows up drunk, misses work, fights with his co-workers. Margaret realized that Claudia and Mary were the true victims of the situation. Claudia, what exactly do you want from me? I don't want money, Margaret. I just want you to keep taking Mary here. She comes home calmer after talking with you. What about Edward? Edward would have to truly change to deserve your forgiveness, and I don't believe he'll change until he loses a few more important things. Margaret was surprised by Claudia's answer. You think he needs to lose more things? Margaret, Edward always got what he wanted through manipulation or support from other people. First you supported him financially, now I work 2 jobs to support the family. He never learned to have real responsibility. And why do you stay with him? For Mary, and because I have hope that one day he'll wake up to reality. Margaret understood that Claudia was in a very difficult situation. Claudia, I have a proposal for you. What proposal? If you really want to leave Edward and rebuild your life, I can help. Not with direct money, but with opportunities. How so? I'm thinking of expanding the center. I'll need more staff. If you're interested, I can offer you a job here. Claudia was shocked. You would do that for me? After everything? I'd do it for Mary, and because I see that you're genuinely sorry and wanting to change your life. What kind of work? Administrative activities, supporting the elderly, organizing events. Nothing that requires specific training, but it pays a decent salary. And could I bring Mary to work with me on weekends? Of course, Mary is practically already part of the team here. Claudia started crying with relief. Margaret, you're offering me the chance to restart my life. I'm offering you what someone offered me, an opportunity to regain dignity. A week later, Claudia started working at the center. Edward initially tried to stop her, but when he found out she was determined, he became verbally aggressive. "You're going to work for that old woman who destroyed our family," he yelled at home. "Edward, who destroyed our family was us with our choices," Claudia replied, now with a confidence she hadn't shown in years. "If you go work there, I don't want anything more to do with you." "Edward, you haven't wanted anything to do with me for a long time. The difference is that now I don't want anything more to do with you either." That's how Claudia found the courage to finally leave Edward. Mary was thrilled with her mother's decision. "Grandma, I've never seen my mother so determined," she commented during one of her visits to the center. "Mary, sometimes people just need an opportunity to show what they're capable of." "And my father? Your father will now have to learn to live alone and be responsible for himself. Maybe that will make him grow as a person. Do you think he can change?" "Everyone can change, Mary. But the change has to come from within. It can't be forced from outside." Edward tried for a few weeks to win Claudia back, alternating between promises of change and threats of revenge. But Claudia, supported by Margaret and her new financial stability, stood firm in her decision. "Margaret," Claudia said one day, "I wanted to thank you for giving me this opportunity. Claudia, you're doing very well at work. The elderly really like you. I feel useful for the first time in years, and Mary is much happier too. And Edward. Edward is living alone now. I heard you got a part-time job. Maybe the separation is good for him too." Margaret was satisfied with how things had progressed. She had managed to save two important people in the family without compromising her principles or going back on the decisions she had made. 2 months after Claudia and Edward's separation, Margaret received a call she wasn't expecting. "Margaret, it's Richard." "Richard, what do you want?" "Mum, I wanted to talk to you about Edward." "What about Edward?" "He's going through a really tough time. He lost his family, he's living alone, working a job that barely pays the basic bills." "And?" "And I thought maybe you could consider him for a job at the center too." Margaret almost laughed at the suggestion. "Richard, are you serious?" "I am, Mum. Edward has changed a lot these past few months. He stopped drinking, he's working, he's taken responsibility for his own mistakes." Richard, Claudia and Mary came to the center because they showed genuine remorse and a real desire to change. Edward abandoned his own mother at a city landfill. "But Mom, everyone deserves a second chance." "Richard, Edward already had his second chance, and third, and fourth. He wasted all of them." "What if he really has changed this time?" "Richard, if Edward has really changed, he'll be able to rebuild his life without my help. That's how real change works." Richard tried a different approach. "Mum, don't you miss any of us?" "Richard, I miss the children you could have been. I don't miss the adults you became. So there's no possibility of reconciliation." "Richard, when you show real and lasting changes, not just when you're in trouble, we can talk. Until then, we each go our own way." Margaret hung up the phone, certain she had made the right decision. Carol, who had overheard the conversation, approached. "Mrs. Margaret, do you think you were too hard on him?" "Carol, sometimes being tough is the greatest act of love we can show someone. Constantly rescuing them from their own consequences doesn't help them grow." 2 years had passed since Claudia and Mary joined the center. The project had grown considerably and now served over 40 people, including seniors in full-time care, part-time care, and families under supervision. Margaret was 76 years old, and her energy for the work impressed everyone around her. "Mrs. Margaret, aren't you thinking of slowing down?" asked Carol during one of the weekly meetings. "Carol, this work gives me energy. It's as if I've finally found the real purpose of my life." Mary, now 18, had been accepted into college for psychology. "Grandma, when I graduate, I want to come back and work here at the center as a psychologist." "Mary, are you sure? Don't you want to explore other opportunities first?" "I'm absolutely sure. This place taught me what real family is. I want to give back by helping others find the same." It was during the celebration of the center's 3rd anniversary that Margaret received an unexpected visitor. It was a Saturday afternoon, and they were having a small party in the garden when Carol approached. "Mrs. Margaret, there's someone at the front desk who would like to speak with you." "Who is it?" "It's Edward." Margaret was silent for a few seconds. Mary, who was nearby, overheard the conversation. "Grandma, do you want me to send him away?" "No, Mary, I'll talk to him." Margaret went to the front desk, where Edward was waiting, standing, visibly nervous. She observed him carefully. He looked thinner, his skin healthier, his eyes clearer. He didn't look like someone who had been drinking recently. "Edward." "Hi, Mom. What do you want?" "I wanted to speak with you, just 5 minutes." "Go ahead." "Not here. Would it be possible to talk in private?" Margaret took him to a private room at the center. "You can speak." Edward took a deep breath before beginning. "Mum, I didn't come here to ask for money, work, or any favors." "Then why did you come?" "I came to apologize. For real. And I came to tell you that I understood what you did." "What do you mean?" "Mom, when you kicked us out of the house and cut ties with us, I was angry. I thought you were being cruel and vindictive." Edward paused to control his emotion. "But after 2 years living on my own, working to support myself, taking on my own responsibilities, I understood that you were teaching me." "Teaching you what?" "Teaching me to be a man. For the first time in my life, at 42 years old, I'm living without depending on anyone." Margaret watched him closely, looking for signs of sincerity. "And I discovered that I'm capable of this, Mum. I found out that I can work, pay my bills, take care of my own home, make responsible decisions." "Edward, why are you telling me this?" "Because I want you to know that it wasn't in vain. What you did worked. I've changed." "Changed how?" "I stopped drinking completely a 1.5 years ago. I've been working at the same job for 2 years. I managed to rent a small but decent apartment. I'm in therapy by my own choice, not because someone told me to." Margaret was surprised by the account, but remained skeptical. "Edward, are you telling me all this expecting me to do what?" "Nothing, Mom. I'm not expecting anything. I just wanted you to know that your methods worked." "Do your siblings know you came here?" "No. Richard and Patricia still have the same problems as always. They think I'm being stupid by admitting that you were right." "And do you think I was?" "I'm sure you were right, Mum. We were spoiled adults who never learned to take responsibility. You tried to teach us that in a caring way for years, and when it didn't work, you had to use more drastic methods." Edward paused. "Mom, I abandoned you in a landfill, literally in a landfill. There's no excuse for that. There's no forgiveness I can ask that erases the seriousness of what I did." "Then why are you here?" "Because regardless of forgiveness or reconciliation, I needed you to know that I recognize my mistakes and that I'm trying to become a better person." Margaret remained silent for a few minutes, processing everything she had heard. "Edward, you said you're in therapy. What does your psychologist say about this visit?" "He said I should come here without expectations, that the important thing was for me to recognize my mistakes and communicate my change, regardless of your reaction." "And Mary? Do you know she comes here?" "I know. I'm glad she has you in her life. And I'm glad that Claudia managed to rebuild her life away from me." "You don't feel angry with me for taking your family away?" "No, Mum. I feel angry with myself for creating a situation where my own mother needed to protect my family from me." Margaret was impressed with the maturity of Edward's answers. "Edward, if I asked you what you hope for from this conversation, what would you tell me?" "I would say that I hope you continue to be happy with the life you've built. I hope you keep helping people like you're doing, and I hope that one day when you look back, you can feel proud of the decision you made, because it saved at least one of your children." Margaret felt her eyes well up. "Edward." "Mom, I know what I did is unforgivable. I'm not asking for forgiveness because I know I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that it was worth it, that the pain you felt wasn't in vain." Edward stood up to leave. "Edward, wait." He stopped and looked at her. "I want to track your progress. I want to see if this change is real and lasting." "How?" "You can come here once a month for us to talk. No commitments, no promises, just so I can keep up with how you're doing." Edward was moved. "You would do that?" "I would, but with one condition. The first time I notice you've returned to your old habits, our relationship ends for good." "Understood, Mom." "And Edward, you can't tell anyone about these conversations. Not Richard, not Patricia." "Why?" "Because they haven't reached where you are yet, and I don't want them to use your progress as an excuse to try to get close to me without real change." Edward agreed to all the conditions. During the following months, Margaret tracked Edward's progress through the monthly meetings. She discreetly verified the information he provided, asking for details about work, therapy, and his daily routine. "Edward, how is your relationship with alcohol?" she asked during one of their meetings. "Mom, I haven't had a drink in almost 2 years. No beer, no wine, nothing." "And how do you handle temptations?" "With therapy, mostly, and by maintaining a healthy routine. I wake up early, work, exercise, read, watch movies. I don't go to places where I used to drink." "And financially?" "I'm stable, Mom. There's not much left over, but I can pay all my bills without depending on anyone." "Edward, do you miss how things were before?" "I miss the feeling of financial security I had when you supported the family, but I don't miss the person I was back then." Margaret was impressed with the consistency of Edward's answers and behavior. After 6 months of monthly meetings, she made an important decision. "Edward, I have something to propose to you." "What is it, Mom?" "I want you to see the work we do here at the center." "How so?" "I want you to participate in some activities as a volunteer, so I can see how you interact with other people, especially the elderly." Edward accepted the proposal immediately. In the following weeks, he began participating in the center's activities on Saturday mornings. Carol observed his behavior closely. "Mrs. Margaret, Edward interacts very well with the elderly. He's patient, respectful, and shows genuine interest in helping." Mary was also impressed with her father's change. "Grandma, my dad is very different. He doesn't even seem like the same person." "Mary, how do you feel about that?" "I'm happy for him, but I'm still cautious. He's changed a few times before, but it never lasted this long. That's exactly why I'm testing him slowly." After 3 months of volunteer work, Margaret decided to take another step. "Edward, I have another proposal for you." "Go ahead, Mom." "I'm thinking of offering you a job here at the center." Edward was shocked. "A job? Mom, are you sure?" "I am, but it would be a job like any other. Market rate salary, regular hours, specific responsibilities. And what would my role be? General support for the elderly, maintenance of the space, organizing activities. Nothing glamorous, but dignified work." "Mom, I accept, but I have a question." "What?" "How will Claudia and Mary react to this? I've already spoken with them. Claudia said if you've really changed, she has no problem working in the same place. Mary agreed too." "And if I disappoint you?" "Edward, if you disappoint, you'll be fired like any other employee. Simple as that." Edward started working at the center the following week. Margaret watched him closely, but also maintained a normal professional relationship with him. "Edward," she said after 2 weeks, "how are you feeling working here?" "Mom, I feel useful. It's the first time in my life that I feel my work really makes a difference in other people's lives." "And how is your relationship with Claudia and Mary?" "Respectful and cordial. We haven't become a family again, but we managed to get along well professionally." "And don't you feel like trying to win them back?" "No, Mom. I understand they're better off without me as a husband and father. Maybe in the future we can be friends, but for now the important thing is to respect each other's space." Margaret was impressed with Edward's emotional maturity. 6 months after Edward started working at the center, Margaret made the most difficult decision since the beginning of that whole story. "Edward, I want to talk to you about our relationship." "Of course, Mom. Over the past 2 years you've shown real and consistent change, not just in words but in actions." "Thank you, Mom." "Edward, I'm willing to rebuild our mother-son relationship. Slowly, carefully, but genuinely." Edward began to cry. "Mom, are you sure?" "I am. You've proven you're capable of real change. You've proven you can take responsibility. And, most importantly, You've proven you understand the seriousness of what you did and are genuinely sorry. Mom, I promise I'll never disappoint you again. Edward, don't make me promises. Just keep being the person you've become, and our relationship will rebuild naturally. The reconciliation between Margaret and Edward was gradual and careful. They started having Sunday lunches together, always at the centre, where she felt safer. Mary was happy about the reconciliation. Grandma, I'm proud of you for giving Dad a chance. Mary, your mother can also rebuild her relationship with him if she wants. Not because of me, but if she feels it's best for her. And my mother, what does she think? Your mother said she's happy you've gotten your father back. As for the husband, she's still deciding. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. 2 years after the reconciliation with Edward, Margaret was 78 years old, and the centre had become a regional reference in elderly care. Mary had graduated in psychology and was now officially working as the centre's psychologist. Claudia had taken an administration course and become the administrative manager. Edward continued as a general assistant, but had shown special aptitude for recreational activities and physical therapy with the elderly. Mrs. Margaret, said Carol during one of the meetings, the centre is functioning like a real family. That's exactly what we wanted to create, Carol. A place where people could experience what a healthy family is like. During this time of stability, Margaret received 2 visits that surprised her. The first was from Richard. Mum, can I talk with you? You may, Richard. What do you want? I heard Edward is working here at the centre and that you've reconciled. And I wanted to know if there's a possibility of reconciliation for me too. Margaret observed him carefully. Richard looked the same as always, well-dressed, confident, with no signs of real change. Richard, tell me what's changed in your life over the past few years. Well, I've stopped gambling as much as before. As much as before? I mean, I've cut back a lot. Now I only gamble occasionally. Richard, Edward stopped drinking completely. You've cut back on gambling, do you see the difference? But Mom, everyone has their own pace of change. Richard, it took Edward 2 years to prove he had truly changed. You want reconciliation without making any real changes. But I regretted what we did to you. Regret without behavior change means nothing, Richard. Richard tried to argue, but Margaret held her position. Richard, when you make real changes in your life, like Edward did, we can talk. Until then, there's nothing to discuss. The second visit was from Patricia, a week after Richard. Mum, I want a chance to show I've changed too. Patricia, what have you changed? I stopped using credit cards to buy unnecessary things. And I'm in therapy. For how long? 3 weeks. Margaret almost laughed at the answer. Patricia, Edward did 2 years of therapy before I considered reconciliation. You did 3 weeks and want me to believe in change? But Mom, everyone deserves a second chance. Patricia, you've already had several chances. You wasted them all. Now you need to prove you deserve another one. How did Edward prove it? Edward proved it by living 2 years independently, responsibly, working, going to therapy, completely stopping drinking, and most importantly, genuinely recognizing the seriousness of the mistakes he made. Patricia left the meeting frustrated, but Margaret was at peace with her decisions. Edward, who had witnessed his siblings' visits, commented to Margaret, Mum, they still haven't understood that real change takes time and requires effort. That's exactly it, Edward. They want the benefits of reconciliation without paying the price of change. And do you think they'll ever understand that? I don't know, Edward, but I know it's not my responsibility to save them. Each person has to choose who they want to be. During this conversation, Mary approached. Grandma, can I say something? Of course, dear. I'm proud to see how you handled this whole situation. You taught me that true love sometimes requires firmness. Mary, it was one of the hardest lessons of my life, but it was necessary. And you also taught that family isn't just blood. It's commitment, respect, and mutual care. Margaret looked around the centre, seeing the elderly talking, laughing, participating in activities, feeling valued and loved. Edward organizing a stretching activity, Claudia handling administration efficiently, Mary attending to elderly and therapy sessions, Carol coordinating everything with care and dedication. Mary, you're right. This is my true family now. People who chose to be here out of love and commitment, not obligation or interest. 5 years had passed since the center's creation. Margaret was 80 years old, but maintained impressive vitality. Edward had specialized in recreation for the elderly and become a key part of the center. Mary was considered one of the best psychologists in the region, specializing in geriatrics. Claudia had transformed the center into a model of administrative efficiency. Carol continued to be the soul of the project. The center now served over 80 people and had inspired the creation of similar projects in other cities. "Mrs. Margaret," said Carol during a special meeting, "the time has come for us to talk about succession." "What do you mean?" "You're 80 years old. We need to plan the center's future for when you can no longer lead actively." Margaret knew this conversation would come sooner or later. "Carol, I've already thought about this. I want Mary to take over the general coordination of the center." "And me?" asked Carol. "You will be the executive director. Mary will handle the technical and psychological aspects. You'll handle operational management." "And Edward?" asked Mary. "Edward will be the activities coordinator, and Claudia will continue handling the administrative part." "Mom," said Edward, "are you sure you want to give me this responsibility?" "Edward, you've proven over 5 years that you're trustworthy and dedicated. She deserves this opportunity." It was then that Margaret announced a decision that surprised everyone. "And I have another piece of news to share. I've decided to make a formal donation of all my properties to the center." "What do you mean?" asked Carol. "I'm going to legally transfer ownership of the 4 houses to a foundation that will be created to keep the center running forever." "And where will you live?" asked Mary. "I'll live right here at the center. I'll be a regular resident, cared for by the team I helped form." The decision caused great emotion in everyone. "Grandma, are you sure about this?" asked Mary. "I'm absolutely sure. I want my inheritance to be used to continue helping people, not to create new family conflicts." "What about Richard and Patricia? Won't they inherit anything?" asked Edward. "Edward, Richard and Patricia never showed real interest in me as a person. They were only interested in my money. It's fair that my inheritance goes to people who truly care about me." The foundation was created in the following months, ensuring the center's sustainability for decades. Richard and Patricia tried to contest the donation legally, but discovered that Margaret had prepared everything with perfect legal precision, leaving them without arguments. During this process, Edward received a visit from Richard at his home. "Edward, don't you think it's wrong to let our mother donate everything to strangers?" "Richard, the people who work at the center aren't strangers. They're the family our mother chose to have." "But Edward, it's our inheritance right." "Richard, inheritance rights are earned with love and dedication, not with abandonment and mistreatment." "Have you turned against us?" "I haven't turned against you. I've turned in favor of what's right, and what's right is for our mother to do what she wants with her life and her money." Richard left the conversation frustrated, but Edward was at peace with his convictions. Patricia also tried a different approach, seeking out Mary directly. "Mary, don't you think your grandmother is being manipulated by these people at the center?" "Aunt Patricia, my grandmother is the most lucid and determined person I know. Nobody manipulates her." "But Mary, think about our family's future." "Aunt, our family's future depends on you all genuinely changing like my father changed." "What if we change now? Is there still time?" "Aunt, it took my father 5 years to regain Grandma's trust. You would have to be willing to make a similar commitment." Patricia realized it wouldn't be an easy or quick process. At the end of that year, the center held a big party to celebrate 5 years of operation. Margaret gave an emotional speech to all present. "When I created this center, I thought I was helping other people rebuild their lives. In truth, I was rebuilding my own life. I learned that true family is made of people who choose to love, respect, and care for each other, regardless of blood ties. I learned that true love sometimes requires firmness, boundaries, and even distance when necessary. And most importantly, I learned that it's never too late to start over, and never too early to teach others that they deserve to be treated with dignity. Edward approached the microphone. "Mother, I'd like to speak on behalf of all of us. You taught us that real change is possible, but requires work, time, and genuine commitment. You taught us that consequences are necessary for people to grow and become responsible. And most importantly, you taught us that true love doesn't accept disrespect, even when that disrespect comes from people we love." Mary also asked to speak. "Grandma, you created more than just a support center for the elderly here. You created a model of how healthy relationships should work, based on mutual respect, commitment, honesty, and genuine care. And she showed all of us that it's possible to start over at any age with dignity and purpose." The party continued through the night, with music, dancing, and much joy. Margaret watched it all with a feeling of fulfillment she hadn't felt in decades. She had lost 3 children to their own misguided choices, but she had gained a much larger family, based on solid values and genuine love. She had regained a son through persistence and firmness, showing that real change is possible when there is genuine commitment. And most importantly, she had created a legacy that would continue helping people long after she was no longer present. At the end of the night, when everyone had left, Margaret sat in her room at the center, looking through the windows at the garden she had helped create. Carol knocked on the door. "Mrs. Margaret, may I come in?" "Of course, Carol. How are you feeling after all this?" Margaret thought carefully before answering. "Carol, I feel complete. For the first time in my life, I feel I've used my experience and my resources to create something truly valuable." "And what about your other children?" "I still feel sadness for Richard and Patricia, but I've learned that I can't save people who don't want to be saved. Do you think they can still change?" "There's always hope, Carol, but until that happens, I'll focus my energy on the people who really want to build something positive." Carol sat in the armchair near the bed. "Mrs. Margaret, may I ask a personal question?" "Of course. Do you regret anything you did during this whole process?" Margaret reflected for a few minutes. "I don't regret anything, Carol. Not the difficult decisions, not the firmness I had to have, not the relationships I had to end." "And the reconciliation with Edward?" "I especially don't regret the reconciliation with Edward. He showed that people can change when they really want to." "What would you say to other people who are going through similar situations?" "I would say that true love sometimes requires firmness, that we should never accept disrespect, even from people we love, and that it's possible to rebuild our lives at any age with dignity and purpose." Carol was moved by the answer. "Mrs. Margaret, you've saved many lives with this center, including mine." "Carol, we saved each other. That's how it works when people come together for a cause greater than themselves." The next morning, Margaret woke up early and went to the center's garden, where she liked to have coffee while watching the city waking up. Mary joined her, as she did every morning before starting work. "Grandma, what are you thinking about?" "I'm thinking that it took me 72 years to discover what my true purpose in life was." "And what is it?" "To teach people to value themselves and not accept relationships that diminish or mistreat them." "Do you think you've managed to do that?" "I think I'm managing, Mary. Every person who comes through here and regains their dignity is a victory." "And now? What are the plans for the future?" "Now I'm going to enjoy every day of my life, knowing that I've built something that will continue to exist after me." At that moment, Edward approached, carrying a tray with fresh coffee and homemade bread. "Good morning, Mother." "Good morning, Mary." "Good morning, son." The word son still moved Edward, even after 5 years. "Mother, 3 more requests have come in from people wanting to learn about the center." "What kind of situations?" "A lady who is being pressured by her children to sell her house, a gentleman whose children want to institutionalize him against his will, and a family that wants guidance on how to better care for their grandmother." "Perfect. That's exactly why we exist." Margaret rose from her chair and headed inside the center, ready for another day of work. At 80 years old, she had finally found the perfect balance between giving and receiving, between loving and being respected, between forgiving and maintaining healthy boundaries. She had transformed the cruelest abandonment into an opportunity for rebuilding not only her own life, but the lives of dozens of others, and she had created a legacy that demonstrated it's never too late to start over, and that dignity is not negotiable, regardless of age or circumstances. The center continued to grow and impact lives. Richard and Patricia eventually understood they wouldn't have access to the family inheritance, but they never made the necessary changes to genuinely reconcile with their mother. Edward continued to evolve as a person and professional, becoming a model that real transformation is possible. Mary specialized and became a regional reference in geriatric psychology. Claudia completely rebuilt her life, married again to a man who respected and valued her. Carol remained the driving force of the center, ensuring Margaret's vision was kept intact. And Margaret lived her final years with the peace of someone who fulfilled her mission. She showed that true love includes boundaries, that family is built with choices and not just blood, and that dignity is an inalienable right that must be preserved at all costs. End of story. Now tell me what you thought of this story and where you're watching from. Do you think Margaret made the right decisions by distancing herself from the children who mistreated her? And what do you think about the reconciliation with Edward? Was it fair, or should she have kept her distance? Share your honest opinion in the comments. If this story moved you or made you reflect on family relationships, don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other stories that will touch your heart. Your participation is very important to us.